Hey, it's good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you too, Dave.
How did you know I had this topic in mind today? Middle versus the edge.
Well, middle versus edge is a tricky thing, and I'm guessing you just came from Annapolis, the Sailing World Nude there, and that's a classic venue where you might have to go all the way to a side, and sometimes you got to go up the middle.
So, yes. So it's explain to me, how you get to this point of do you go up the middle or do you play the edges? And I imagine we're going to talk about this in a two-part kind of process, right? And let's talk about the middle first because that's the safe way to go. Is how do we simplify, our strategy on this open race course?
Yeah, so I think the first part of it is exactly that. You need to simplify strategy. It's hard enough as it is to go figure out what to do. And I think in the end, you got to boil it down in your head. If you can't say, I want to go to a side or I want to go up the middle, I want to go left, I want to go right, or I want to go up the middle, that's your goal. You want to simplify it to that result.
What is the middle?
So the middle.
How do you define the middle? Like this, like it could be a 2 mile beat, and middle that's obviously the middle gets skinnier as you get to the top of the cone, right? But what is the middle of the course?
So maybe the simplest way to define it is if that's your weather mark and this is your starting line, and it really doesn't matter how long the course is. The course has, you come off the pin, you come to a ley line. If you tacked right at the boat, you come to a ley line. The edge is following this path or this path, going basically to a corner. Now, you don't have to bang the corner to have gone to an edge. Sometimes you might want to, but more often than not, you might want to go quite all the way. But the point is you're going to a side. Whereas the middle, you're playing shifts or connecting puffs. You might tack, anywhere from 4 to 8 times or something like that, or maybe if it's really shifty, more than that. But that's really the difference. One is you're trying to get to a side, and the other is you're trying not to. You're trying to kind of work up the middle and not get leveraged out to a side.
Man, if from a very basic level, it looks like a zigzag up the middle. That's the shortest way to get to the mark. So why doesn't everybody just go the middle?
Well, so it isn't the shortest way. If there was zero shifts and zero side biased, if you tacked up the middle or went to either edge, you'd all come to the top mark at the same time, assuming that when you tacked, you had zero loss, which isn't realistic. But you're not really sailing any extra distance. You still have to sail basically 45 degrees to the wind, whether you go to the edge or not. And that's, the beauty of playing shifts is you can narrow those angles up to the mark because you're on one shift or the other. Beauty of going to an edge is maybe there's an advantage over there, and we're going to talk about what those advantages might be.
All right, so we're presuming here we're gonna go sail up the middle and play the shifts. It's a beautiful, easy day. The shifts are coming every couple minutes, or so explain what you mean by playing the shifts up the middle, or what are some thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a number of different kinds of shifts that you can play up the middle, but the important thing for playing shifts up the middle is it has to shift enough that it comes back. So there's certain wind shifts, like it shifts right, okay, maybe it shifts right even more and even more. That's a persistent shift. And, if it doesn't come back, you can't go up the middle. So the whole idea is you're counting on the fact that you're on a lifted tack and that it's going to come back so that you're going to get headed so that you can tack onto the lifted tack on the other tack. So really simply, suppose you start and the wind's a little bit to the right. You go along that way, and then let me write it this way. I'll make the right shifts in green. So if the wind shifts over here, where your angle would have been if it was straight down the course, it might have been more like this. You're sailing closer to the mark, sailing less distance. So then suppose it shifts back left. And then you tack, you're lifted here, and so on. So you're sailing less than the 45-degree angles by playing shifts.
So easy, and it just miraculously happens for you all the time. How is that? Yeah.
Well, so how this happens can be very different. And, some days, I drew some pretty obvious shifts, but some days maybe it's only 5-degree shifts, or, you might not even barely notice them. And that's where playing, reading the compass comes in. So what we do is we go out early on a day like that, and we collect lots of numbers on your compass, and then we agree on a mean, something that we think is the middle, and anything to the left of that, we want to be on port tack. If the wind's to the right of that mean, we want to be on starboard tack.
So that's
So
yeah, wind back that a little bit. Like it's part of your pre-race work, right? Where you're sailing up the beep, you whatever, 20 minutes before the race, and you're keeping track of the numbers, and you write those on the deck, and then you've got those as your reference guide, right?
absolutely. And what we do is we sail upwind, and we just take numbers on port and starboard, and just keep taking those numbers, and eventually you kind of get a range. And typically the mean we start off with our most obvious mean would be the middle of that range of numbers.
Okay.
So if it's 10-degree shifts and we were at 175, on starboard tack, 180 would be a lift, 170 would be a header, and 175 would be our mean.
And how often does your tactician, or even you, if you're sailing a single-handed boat, you kind of keep going back to those numbers as a reminder? Sometimes it's easy when you're sucked into the race to kind of lose track of where you are in that trend, if you will.
Well, I definitely write down the numbers when I'm sailing by myself. I really write the numbers down in the deck because I really need to know. I'm not going to remember what they were. I have some crew that are really tuned into the numbers. They don't even need to write them down. For some reason they can remember them. I can't. I need to write them down, but particularly when I'm single-handed. But what I'll do is I'll be sailing along, and I'll feel a change. Like I think I just bear off a little bit. And maybe I'm headed. I look at my compass and I look at my number on the deck and like, nope, I'm still up. Or, oh yeah, that was a nice lefty. Do I want to tack? Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So this is all presuming that the shifts are happening nice and rhythmically, and but yeah, we know that's never to be the case. So what
Yeah.
about persistent? How and its relation to sailing up the middle?
Well, so if you're talking about persistent shift, I sort of don't want to sail up the middle.
Hmm.
And what happens is if, suppose I start the race and the wind's right here, or maybe I get a little righty here, right off the starting line. I go, good, I got a little righty, I'm lifted, great. And in our other scenario, it shifted back, and I got myself a lefty, and I've gotten phase and everything. There's another scenario where a little while later, this doesn't happen. Instead, it shifts a little more right, and then a little more right. So that's a persistent shift. And what'll happen is you're like, oh, I'm lifted. Oh, good, I'm lifted even more. And before you know it, you have to sail all the way up here before you can tack and get to the mark. Whereas somebody that tacked here is going to get headed, and they're going to lift right to the tack, sail much less distance. So that's a tricky one. You have to recognize that it's a persistent versus an oscillating shift.
And what's
And
your rule of thumb if it's like truly persistent? Is it a time thing or more of a feeling, as you said?
I have to look at other boats to tell if it's a persistent shift, and I have to look at the water. So there might be some indicator over here, like maybe there's new wind coming in, or maybe there's a cloud up here, just one of those dark clouds. It's a downdraft cloud. Maybe there's something that tells me that there's something coming in. But absent that, if I can't see it, maybe I can see pressure on the water. But if I can't see it on the water or in the clouds, I look for it on other boats. So I have a rule of, talk about a rule of thumb, like I'm sailing upwind here, and I'm like, we're up 10. Like, great, we're up 10, right? Great. And then somebody over here, maybe they're, then the answer to that is, yeah, but over our shoulder, they're up 20, they're up more than us. Yeah.
Bummer.
But
Dot,
but they're
dot, dot. Yeah.
this is a but, right?
Yeah.
They're lifted more. So my theory here, my rule of thumb is if I'm lifted, but somebody over my shoulder is lifted more than me, I'm not lifted. something's changed. And that's my, like, I throw out, as soon as I see that, I throw out the compass numbers and like something's changing. And this may happen after I've done a great job of getting all my numbers before the start, and I get in the race and something changes.
Gotcha. So, back to before we get over to the edge, let's go back to the middle. Shifts are sort of recognizable. What about puffs? I mean, are you chasing? I mean, there's always that great quote about
Yes.
connecting the dots.
Right. So there's sort of two different types of shifts, I figure. And they are the ones that are sort of regularly oscillating. And then there's these more random ones. And they might be, coming off of some warm land. If I'm sailing in Miami and you got that northerly over the land, it's just crazy shifts, right? It could be shifting 20 degrees. And once again, as long as it's going to shift back, I can play them as opposed to the persistent shift. And those random ones, you just got to roll with whatever's happening. And I typically won't even use the compass because it's really obvious. And I know what you're going to ask. You say, what's your rule of thumb? So,
How do you do it?
so the rule of thumb is that, if I'm in a shift, instead of using the compass, I really look where I am relative to the mark. If I'm looking ahead here in my boat, and we can look, and more or less the mark is sort of in our field of vision, more or less ahead. I'm on the long tack, I'm happy. If, on the other hand, if I'm going here and I have to look way over my shoulder to look at the mark, then I'm probably on the wrong tack. That's a really simple way. But there also could be other indicators that tell me what's going on. A lot of times these bigger shifts and puffs, you'll be able to see them. You'll be able to see the shifts in puffs. Yeah, you can see it on the water. You can see dark spots on the water. These aren't clouds. These are just looking at the water. And then you sort of connect them. You sail to this one, you get in this one, and you see what the shift is. And then you maybe go to the next one and maybe connect them. And so that's playing shifts up the middle when it's a little bit more random.
With the puffs. I don't know how
Yeah.
you do it so easily. Yeah, you just okay. There's the next puff. There's the next one. Yeah, you link them together and no problem.
You just look. I mean, that's the thing, is you're just looking ahead to see what's going to happen next. And in the meantime, you have that rule of thumb that if the mark's not in front of me, I'm on the wrong tack. And then you only get off that shorter tack if you really see something you can connect to.
Mm. And so what if the kind of the goal is to sail the middle, and you see some puffs that kind of sort of take it to the edge.
Yeah.
But the original plan was to stay in the middle. Do you go chasing puffs on the edges, or now all of a sudden now you're shifting kind of your strategy?
So I think the windier it is, so once you're up to hull speed, I sort of have these back to rules of thumb, hull speed, right? So hull speed, you might get there at 8 knots in a boat or 10 knots or something like that. Shift matters a lot more than pressure. You're not going to go much faster, so you might as well take a shift. And so if I'm not up to hull speed, my rule of thumb is exactly what I said. If I'm not on the long tack, I just roll in the shifts. But I think what happens is if you're below hull speed, right? Then pressure matters a lot. And you might be going, if you're only going 3 knots, you get a puff for another couple knots, you might go 6 knots all of a sudden. You might go way faster. You double your speed. 2 to 4 is not hard to do. And the lower the wind, the more I chase those puffs to an edge if I have to. So maybe I think, it's kind of a rare case that in light air, maybe there's sort of like some pressure here, some pressure here. So maybe I take this pressure, and then I go try to link it up to this pressure. But I find more in light air that ends up turning into an edge day. One side or the other has more pressure than the other.
Okay, so before we get to the edge, take us downwind. Do the same rules apply going downwind then?
So yes and no. I think, the more asymmetric type sailing you do, an asymmetric shoot, you might take much bigger angles. Then you could get to a side, right? So you can play the shifts. But, I think the big difference is that things happen much slower. Suppose you had, 4 shifts upwind. You had a righty, then you had a lefty, then you had another righty. Then right at the weather mark, you had another lefty. Well, downwind, these are moving down the course and you're moving up the course. So you're intersecting with those four. So downwind, you're kind of going down with it. So maybe you round in this puff and this lefty, but you're going to stay in it a while. And maybe you'll just get one instead of the four because it finally passes you, depending on how fast you go. Finally catches up to you. So I think the biggest difference is the pace of how things come. I would expect shifts to come much, much, slower paces. The other big difference is I think pressure means more and more downwind than upwind. In light air, pressure matters, upwind and downwind. But suppose you're in an asymmetrical boat and you're off in this, this reach, and you get a little puff, you're going to go way lower. And you take that pressure and you go down. So I think in when I'm going down, when I'm really, I kind of shift my mental state to really looking toward for pressure. And then in that pressure, there also may be a shift and you decide what to do with it when it gets to you.
Right. Okay. Let's take it to the edge. The goal is to not sail the middle. The middle is deadly for whatever reason. What makes me want to play the edges?
So what makes you want to play the edge is if there's a compelling reason to go to a side. So an edge is a side. And, there could be, I think there's a couple different reasons that could be. Like often if there's land over on this side, so wind gets left shifted over land. So if the wind is over here, it gets shifted a little bit left over land, kind of comes out here and it converges here. So you get left shift and you get some compression, convergence pressure, and more pressure. So almost always you want to kind of go to a side that has more pressure. Conversely, if you went to the right, it would actually be the opposite. It would be the wrong shift and less pressure. You wouldn't want to go to a side if you could get to the right. So we can talk about that more in a future episode, but that's an interesting concept. So this is geographic. So this is number one is geo, right? Geographic. Another reason to go to a side could be current. So maybe it's just plain shallow over here. This is shallow. And the current's coming down, so we'll call this the current instead of the wind this time. Wind's going the same direction as the current. There's going to be less current over here. And a lot more over here. So that's going to be a really compelling reason to go to a side.
And how about, let's be real quick on the persistent shift in terms of going to an edge.
Yeah, so next one's current, right?
And so many venues, it's sort of like, it's a go right venue or go left, right? So at some point in time, you just got to take the conventional.
Yeah, but a lot of times those typical, the venues, it could be that it's a go right or left because of some geography.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to go because it gets you in more wind or there's a shift over there. It's like, or maybe there's current or something. I don't know. But but yeah, so we talked before about the persistent shift. If you're getting lifted and either you see it coming or you don't, but either way, as soon as you recognize it, either before the race, you already know there's a persistent shift, you're going to want to go right away. Or if you see it, somebody else is over here, they're in a persistent shift, you have a decision to make. You see them up, that rule of thumb we just talked about, I'm lifted, but they're lifted more. They're in a persistent shift, I got to get over there.
Mm.
And that turns into an edge because that is the edge, right? You're going to want to go to whatever the new ley line is. So calling that might be a little more tricky because it is a persistent shift. It's changing on you. But yes, the persistent shift is a way. And you may see this coming because of that cloud or whatever. But this persistent shift, and really the same applies to pressure coming into a side. So for some reason, this side, whether you see it coming or not, you see an indicator, you see pressure on the water, and maybe it's not even a shift. There's just more wind. You still got to get over there. And let's talk through that for a second. Suppose it's not a persistent shift, but there's more pressure. So you're sailing along, somebody else gets a bad start, and they get into this pressure, and you're like, wow, they're hiked out, right? They're heeling over. They're all full hiked, and we're sitting in. You're kind of like this. You're like, they got more pressure. And
Bummer.
then you got a decision to make, just like the persistent shift. Am I going to go chase that pressure?
What usually makes you decide to go chase it or not? I mean, obviously there's other boats. There's a lot more going on, but
I think
uh,
that's a really
do
good
you,
question.
do you just kind of wait it out a minute, or kind of see if the wind comes to you?
So I have back to the day seems like a day of rules of thumb.
Mm.
As soon as I see this, whether it's the persistent shift or this, it's a hard decision. I can always hear the tactician saying, well, our plan was to do this. We're lifted a little bit, or we're on plan. And yet over our shoulder, they're in something new and better. I think the answer is always that I tack, head toward that new, whether it's persistent or not, I head that way and then make the decision as we're going that way. Is it real? So you got to answer the question, is it real and sustained?
Mm.
So if the reason they were lifted and or puffed was that there was a local puff and it's gone or it's going to go away, you don't want to chase it because maybe there's one ahead of you that you're going to miss then. But if the reason is it's just filling in from that side or it's just shifting to that right, you're going to make that decision as you're going along. And what you can do is you're like, yeah, that really is real. You just dig in, you just go. Or you can say, no, that's just a fleeting thing. It was just a little temporary. I don't think that's real. You can always tack back. You can still get back on your game plan easy enough.
Easy enough, as always.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
but you're not going to win this race, right? They're already ahead of you.
right.
So
But
this
you can
is,
stay close.
well, you're going to stay in the game and then maybe around, if you're really good, maybe you're rounding in the top third of the fleet and a bunch of those people don't belong there compared to you. And it's gonna be a regatta saving race as opposed to digging your heels in and hoping for the best, and then you get a terrible score.
Sounds good. Okay, so final question in this sort of edges thing. In all your experience, you sailed in a lot of different places. Do you find that, like inshore lakes versus open ocean venues, middles versus side, is one tend to be better? When you're on the lake, you kind of got to get to the sides because you've got the geography thing versus in the open ocean, it's safer maybe to play the middle a little bit. I mean, is there like general sense?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer because I think each day and each location is so different.
Right, right.
I think open water often takes out the geographic. It often takes out the current. Even if there's current, if it's a big world championship, they want to put in open water, you really can't get out of the current because they put you out in the middle of something. So I think that often the bigger venues take out the edge, but often they don't too, because, if Mother Nature is gonna, a lot of times those big courses, it's a long course and maybe over that 20-minute beat, there is some change that makes you want to go left or right. And a lot of times it's like, oh, I should have gone left, but you don't know that, you didn't know that ahead of time.
Right, right.
But I think that's the challenge to those open water courses. When it's not the middle, when it turns into an edge, how are you supposed to know?
Mm.
I think that's probably the question of the century.
Yeah. And oftentimes, I can speak to Newport, Rhode Island, that the edge, geography is, but the geography is miles away, but it's still geography. And therefore, it does come into
Right.
play. Yeah.
So that is a good point. I think that on the lakes and the small bodies of water, these effects are dramatic, right? You're going to get to a shore. You're either going to be right or wrong. It's going to be boom, you're way ahead. I think about these venues that, Annapolis or Key Biscayne or out on the West Coast where, it's some kind of shore effect, but the shore really is far away. And I have found that some of those shore effects are, they do go out several miles, which is hard to believe and very subtle. But, in those open courses, if there's nothing else that makes one side favored, that little subtlety over a really long distance can make a difference.